Hi, everyone. I'm here with Generra Peck. She's a senior advisor at N2 America. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Great to be with you.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about this focus group project that you guys have been embarking on over. I think it's been 22 weeks, right?
That's right. We have been at Into America leading a 22-week qualitative research project focused on suburban Americans and their views, their sentiments, their policy preferences. And we're entering our last week this week. It's been an incredibly instructive, eye-opening process.
Yeah, and I believe you've been in 15 battleground states, right? Can you tell us a little bit about which states those are? I assume it's all the obvious ones: Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, but where else?
That's right. So we're in the key suburban counties and localities in those battleground states. So think Maricopa County in Arizona, Mecklenburg in North Carolina. We're interested in the suburban counties in Michigan. And the qualitative panel we've assembled is about 3 dozen college educated suburban Americans who have agreed to sign on with us for this period of time and give us their real time reaction to everything from the coronavirus to the elections to the issues that they're dealing with at home in their own communities.
And do you strive for a certain demographic breakdown in terms of age, sex, race? What do these groups look like?
Largely, they're college educated men and women in suburban communities. We wanted a cross section, people who are open politically. They're soft Republicans and soft Democrats, independents, people who, though, they don't have their mind made up on the issues, and they're open to messaging and policy solutions that maybe they've just not been presented before.
So these are ongoing. So like you check in with the group periodically throughout the 22-week process.
That's right. So every week we present them with a whole battery of questions that really what's driving the day in the country. So when we first designed this research project and we thought 22 weeks, for example, we had no idea what role the coronavirus would have over the last 22 weeks. We had no idea the way that the election would twist and turn. So we've been able to present them real questions in real time, get their response, and engage with them on their feelings and views about the way that the country, the direction the country's headed.
So what does the process look like? If you could just kind of take us behind the scenes, how do you begin to conduct a focus group actually, face to face with folks in the room?
Yeah, so this is actually it's all been online. So it's a
Okay.
qualitative online process, which again we didn't know coronavirus was happening, and we able to go in the room with these people. So I'd like to say we had that incredible foresight. We just really got lucky. But we worked with Robert Blizzard. He's an incredible pollster at Public Opinion Strategies. Liesl Hookey, Marie Sanderson, two veteran political and policy strategists in the country. And what we basically did is every week we sat down and we said, okay, what's driving the news? What's driving the news in Washington? And but how does that actually relate to what's going on at home? And we then prioritized these questions in a way that was consumable and they could offer feedback without having to be in the beltway no, right? Like we
Hmm.
really took top line issues. And then what they do is they respond through this online qual board and they gave us their honest response. And then we had the opportunity to engage with them, prompt some more follow up. The benefit that I think an online qual board presented, aside from the social distancing benefit, has been that in a focus group, you sort of see the folks who maybe have an unpopular opinion. They kind of quiet up, right? They're not willing to
Mm.
share their opinion. So in a online qualitative board like we've engaged in, everyone's opinion mattered equally because it was not never outweighed by someone else. The other thing you normally don't have in a traditional in-person focus group is routine engagement with these people over time. We had the same people 22 weeks in a row. Normally, focus groups are just a snapshot in time. You're in, you're out, and you don't know how they felt about the next twist and turn in the national political discourse.
That's super interesting. Are these folks compensated, or is this just an agreement to log on and answer the questions?
Yeah, no, they're recruited, they're compensated, much like that you are in a traditional focus group. So the terms and conditions of a traditional focus group are essentially the same, but the way that they really commit to helping provide a lens into what their life is like over a longer period of time is remarkable. They wanted to tell us things about what was going on with their life. Did they have a family member have something happen to them? Did they get a new pet? Things like that as they go through this period of time. And again, that's just something you don't see in a normal focus group. But these people, I felt like we were kind of living their lives with them over the last 22 weeks.
That's very, very interesting. I'm wondering if any sort of consensus emerged on some of these issues, and maybe if you could take us issue by issue, and maybe the responses in the aggregate were too nuanced to say that there was a consensus. But I'm curious as to I've seen some of the responses, and they are very interesting. But I'm curious if you could kind of walk us through what some of the big takeaways from this project were.
Yeah, so a couple things that I walked away with is number one, suburban voters are they care about style and they care about substance. These are savvy Americans, savvy voters who, if you think about it from a consumer branded perspective, the target in Maricopa is the same as the target in Mecklenburg outside of in North Carolina, right? So their consumer experience is very much the same. So is their political experience. The suburbs in Boston and Atlanta feel a lot more similar today than they did 20 or 30 years ago. So the way that they view the issue set and the way they're presented and consume that information, we think about it along the lines of the way a consumer would consume a Starbucks or a Target. It all kind of feels the same regardless of where you live in the country. Now, of course, there are local issues that flavor that. The suburban voters, though, right now, they feel that they're better off now than they were 4 years ago. We know that. However, matters of style sometimes erode their perception on are the policies working. Um, they also care about the details. They want to understand the substance. They don't necessarily have reflexive responses to policy positions that sort of put them in that put them in a box. They want to see nuance. They want to see their leaders consider nuance and process nuance as they're making complicated decisions. One of the things that was most interesting to us has really been the cancel culture debate over the summer and the twists and turns there. The suburban Americans, I would say through this process, it's become very clear to us that they think that the cancel culture movement has gone a little too far, and they're concerned about where it may be going next. Um, I think a lot of people paid attention this past couple weeks to the Girl Scouts and Kappa Delta sorority around the Amy Coney Barrett post and the canceling of that message, them pulling down their social media posts. In my view, the suburban Americans, they don't think it's a big leap between canceling the Girl Scouts or Kappa Delta to canceling their own careers or reputations. That scares them. They worry about their spouse having an unpopular opinion, maybe losing their job, right? And they think that we've perhaps gone too far.
And is that true across the board? You know, if you're zooming into a suburb in Maricopa County as opposed to Waukesha County, as opposed to, some of these areas just kind of coast to coast and not everywhere in between, is that something that was sort of universal among suburban voters?
That's definitely the impression we walked away from the research. I mean, this is qualitative, so we can't make necessarily a statistical inference from it, but overwhelmingly so through this research panel, they feel the same. They believe that people should have second chances. They should be able to make a mistake and not lose their job because of it. They want to see inclusive and responsive communities in their hometown, but again, uh, some of these people, they don't want to worry their husband has says something inappropriate on Facebook one night and is getting a pink slip from the office the next day because it was simply an unpopular opinion.
Republicans were, I think, eager to run against some of the candidates that were explicitly and openly more further left than perhaps Joe Biden is, because they believe that the socialism message is particularly potent with suburban voters. Did you guys find that to be true? Has that sort of panned out in this qualitative back and forth that you've undertaken over the past 22 weeks?
That's a great question. The research we've conducted concludes, in my view, that suburban Americans, they don't endorse the Biden-Harris policy agenda, and they certainly don't endorse some of the further left agenda. They worry about this. They worry about the future of the country with that narrative taking a serious root in parts of the Democratic Party.
And is it the fact that because, if we look at what happened in 2018, Republicans are genuinely struggling with this demographic. Is it the style issue that sort of outweighs for them maybe the substance of what they would worry about in the Biden-Harris policy agenda? Are they prioritizing their concerns about maybe Donald Trump's style over what they might get out of a Biden-Harris policy platform?
Yeah, that's I think a great question. The way I think about it is there's a book club test, right? Your book club. That's the place where you go, and as a suburban American woman, perhaps, and you've got friends, maybe professional acquaintances, neighborhood acquaintances, and would you feel comfortable defending your political choices before them? That's how they weigh these things, and that's why the style matters quite a lot. At the very same time, the reasons why suburban Americans choose to live in the suburbs, it's because they value things like good schools, they value law and order, they value a strong economy. Many times when we think about the suburban Americans that we've been working with on this research project, they think that they live in the suburbs, they've bought the house, they've made it. They're excited about this, and that's a reflection of their priorities and their policy priorities. Fundamentally, suburban Americans are center right, but that book club test and the erosion and concern with the style, I think, has held that back a bit.
Yeah, that is really interesting because I think it gets to, some of what might be happening politically in terms of like the Democratic Party is suddenly taking on these suburban voters, and that's bringing them into a coalition with the far leftists that promote cancel culture and socialism. And so it's kind of interesting to see Democrats or to see suburban voters swinging towards the Democratic Party. Do you think, based on their responses, that that's something that would be durable after the Trump administration, or is it really just a Trump era phenomenon that suburban voters are some of them, not all of them, of course, are voting against Republicans because of the style issue?
I don't think that the Democratic Party has a control of the suburban voter at all. I think if the Biden Harris administration is in place, if Congress is divided or even controlled by Democrats, we're probably going to see an overreach in these policies and this issue matrix that suburban Americans reject. And I think we'll see, them respond in due course in 2 years. So I really think that while style and substance are sometimes conflated, to them right now in this moment, there may be different things because they want to be accepted at their book club, the PTA, whatever it may be. But when they see these real impacts on law and order, on the economy, on other things, I think they'll vote in turn and show up in turn in a few years.
Were you able to probe exactly what sort of, I think it seems obvious, but were you able to probe exactly what sort of stylistic issues about Trump upset them most? Is it the tweeting? Is it the sort of rallies? Is it all of the above? Were there particular maybe pressure points or particular red flags that these suburban voters were rankled by?
So the suburban voters that do have concerns with the president, those that do, what they all had a different story about what brought them to that point in time. But more than anything, and I think overwhelmingly so, it was the perception of how they would be viewed by their support of the president that prevents them from seriously engaging in a conversation on the policy.
That is fascinating because it kind of ties into the cancel culture issue and brings everything full circle.
Yeah, it sure does. I think cancel culture is one of these undercurrent issues that there are so many applications that we need to consider and unpack. The real risk they see at the family unit of the impact of their child or their spouse making a mistake as they see it, and then paying the price for it. In addition to them also sometimes, agreeing with the cancel culture, and because they want to prevent against social. They want to ensure that they are able to work through and experience social acceptance and whatever that means in their community.
Did you ask any questions about the media, and were you able to uncover any sort of like widespread discontent with the media, or are suburban voters among that cohort of Americans that is subscribing to the New York Times and Washington Post at super high rates over the Trump administration?
Yeah, it's a mix, to be honest with you. One of the things that we paid quite a lot of attention to are what are trusted sources, right?
Mm.
And for a lot of suburban Americans, they trust some of the major institutions, media or otherwise. They also trust local voices, and they get most of their news and make most of their decisions through neighborhoods, through friends that they trust and think that are in the know about issues that impact them. Suburban Americans care quite a lot about core functions of government and the application of core functions of government. So, are their schools safe? Are their schools performing well? Are their taxes low? Those are core functions, and otherwise, some of it they just like to tune out the rest of the noise.
My last question is that Democrats are very much counting on this particular demographic to deliver some very key states to them on Tuesday. And I think a lot of Democrats are actually comfortable right now, and a lot of Republicans are quite frightened that they're right to count on that support. But based on your experience over the past 22 weeks and this week right now, uh, do you think that those hopes on the Democrats' behalf and those fears on the Republicans' behalf might be misplaced?
I think the last 10 days, call it, have perhaps changed a little bit. I think President Trump had by in the view of these voters, a good performance in the last debate. And I think that changed some minds. The impact of early voting, absentee voting, and the timing and the number of votes that have already been cast in suburban America, I think is the X factor. We don't quite know what that looks like yet. So I think it would be a mistake for a Democrat to overstate their confidence in that regard. And I think it would be a mistake for a Republican to disregard the value of the suburban voter today or in 2 years from now.
So again, I said I had a last question, but I have one more. Were they really, was this demographic like really torn between Biden and Trump over the course of these 22 weeks? Were there a lot of undecided voters? Were there people who were really mulling this over and unsure for whom to cast their ballot come Tuesday, or if they voted early?
There was definitely an open-minded streak within this cohort. There really was. That said, after a couple inflection points, including the first debate between President Trump and Vice President Biden, we saw confidence in a Trump reelection decrease. They thought that it tanked after that. Then, likewise, after the second debate, we saw a re, resurgence in the confidence and the potential there. I do think they're torn. However, I think style for this group is going to overtake substance. But there's certainly folks that their preferences on law and order and the economy are overtaking any concerns about the style back at home.